Welcome back. This is session 2. In session 1, we looked at the strategy of gathering information. And we also looked how easy it can be sometimes to crack PSLs simply by marketing high-demand candidates. Hopefully I gave you a few tips on how you can also avoid wasting your time. In this session, we'll be looking at what clients really want from recruiters, what they want from recruiters on their PSL, and how to influence the key decision makers, how to really differentiate your service. Jeremy, you've got quite a unique insider view on that, having worked on both sides of the fence, so to speak. What are clients looking for from a preferred supplier?
I think when they're going through the review process, it tends to be 3 key things that they're looking for, regardless of what you're told. Cost, track record, and ability to differentiate your service from your competitors, or to give the client a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Cost, I guess, speaks for itself. Most PSLs do have some kind of financial reason for being put in place, particularly if they're being run by the procurement or finance function. Track record, again, relatively obvious. If you've proven to be capable within an organisation in recruiting good people for them, then the chances are that's going to help you in a PSL situation. Differentiation is probably the most tricky one, particularly in an industry which is one where the service is similar. But a few ideas. Niche is the most obvious one. If you have a particular candidate strength or strength in the marketplace that you can sell off over and above generalist recruiters or your competition. But things as subtle as being able to help an organisation with its diversity policy, for instance. So if you're in the marketplace and able to assist in creating the diverse workforce that the client is looking for, over and above your competition, then that's something that genuinely helps.
Can I just ask on that? You sort of put cost as the top. Is that in any particular order?
My experience would tell me that the vast majority of PSLs are put in place with the prime driver of reducing cost.
Right.
I agree with that.
Above all else?
Yeah.
Say, for example,
particularly now, I think that the marketplace has got a lot more sophisticated in its buying of recruitment services, and as a result of that, cost is usually the primary driver.
I think as well it can depend on who's putting together the PSL, because I think if it's being done by a purchasing department or procurement, price is certainly going to be the driving factor. I think if it's being done by a HR department, it may well be quality issues that aren't being met or control aspects. So I think it really depends on which department it is that's putting the PSL, which will be the factors as to what drives the criteria as to why they're doing it.
How important is it to have the track record with the company first? I mean, have you got basically no chance unless you've got a track record with the company?
I think so.
I don't entirely agree with that. I think for generalist recruiters or large recruitment companies, then it may be that they are looking to buy the power in the marketplace that organisation is able to offer. For niche suppliers, it may be that traditionally that particular area of the market has not been well served by the recruitment companies that they have used in times gone by. So I do believe there is an opportunity for recruitment businesses to win PSL status, even if they haven't got a track record with that organisation, but they tend to be relatively few and far between.
I think if you have no track record with the organisation nor a good reputation.
Yes.
What if you have no reputation? And I don't mean as in they don't like you, but the fact is they maybe don't know you. I mean, in a smaller environment, smaller companies, they've heard of you, but they have no opinion of you either way.
No, sorry. What I meant was they hadn't even heard of you. So, so if you have no track record, existing relationship with them, nor do you have any real market credibility, unless you can come up with something that nobody else has got, which is a unlikely possibility, but nonetheless possibility, I think you'll struggle. There needs to be something as a platform. It does vary, though. I mean, I think a point I'd like to make that's sort of emanated from earlier points is understanding the level of sophistication of the client, and also where they're at in their overall buying cycle. So Sue made the point earlier on about they have an incumbent who's doing this, that and the other, touting for information. Another organisation may never have had a PSL, and someone like Jeremy may be saying to them, you should have one. So they would be at a completely different start point, and what they would seek to achieve from that may differ. It may be the same sorts of things, but the degree to which it's cost or service. And another thing about an organisation's ability to deliver is timescales.
In what way?
Well, the key things certainly for me at Barclays were everything that Jeremy said, but the underpinning ones were cost, time and quality. Because the lost opportunity cost of having a vacancy outstanding for too long is very hard to measure, but organisations are starting to measure productivity levels more, and therefore, particularly in call centres, for instance, you know, 1 in 20 people are going to work in a call centre. If you have a call centre seat vacant for 10 weeks instead of 8, makes a big difference.
So the
an
time
organisation who can fill that job within 8 weeks compared with somebody who can do it in 10.
And would they want some sort of guarantees?
Oh, the client will always want some guarantees.
So in terms of the actual, I mean, in terms of the actual time it takes to fill a vacancy?
More and more you'll get a service level agreement, and if you fail the metric that you've agreed and signed up to, there usually would be some form of penalty, principally financial.
Yes.
And what's realistic in terms of filling, you know, an average vacancy? What sort of time frame would a client be
There's no such
wanting
thing
to
as
do?
an average vacancy, Mike.
Yeah, I think it depends on the field as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this. I mean, Barclays is a very diverse organisation, and actually when you get into those averages it becomes meaningless.
The reason for asking that question is, if there's no such thing, then how can it be measured?
You have to narrow it down. So there is such a thing in IT recruitment, or there is such a thing in call centre recruitment, but to have it across the piece becomes meaningless. If you added up all the vacancies, divided up the time scale and came up with 10 weeks,
Yes.
that actually is a meaningless number.
So in terms of companies making a decision for getting onto preferred supplier listings and to certain commitments, they need to think very carefully about their delivery timescale within their own market space.
Can I just make a point on track record as well that was said earlier? I think yes, it's about the track record you've got with that organisation, but I think very often it's about your experience in dealing in that type of sector or with that type of industry.
So that can count as part of the track record, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, a good practical example would be, let's take accountancy recruitment as our marketplace, but a client has found that the accounting recruiters that they've been dealing with aren't particularly good on tax or actuarial vacancies, so they go out specifically to add an actuarial recruiter to their PSL. Now that organisation might never have had any dealings with that particular business, but they've got a great reputation in the marketplace for being able to find actuaries and have done so very successfully for other organisations. So that would be a good example of where someone might not have any track record within the business to whom they are pitching, but would have a very good chance of being successful.
In terms of those specialist niche players, is there ever an instance where you can be on the preferred supplier listing but at full fee because of your specialism?
Yeah. I find that. Let's make a point, sorry, about PSL criteria. You didn't mention, and I find this is on the increase, very much so, you didn't mention added value, which we're being asked for all the time. How can you add value? I think there's 2 reasons for it. One, they want more for their money. And secondly, they want, if it's an HR department or a procurement department, and normally it's one of the 2, isn't it? They want their own image within the company to be enhanced by this decision. So if they make the right decision and deliver more value to the business than perhaps they were perceived to be able to do before, that'll be seen as a great thing to have done.
Clients look closely at cost, quality, track record and the ability to provide competitive advantage. And if you want to offer more value than your competitors in these key areas, I recommend recruitment businesses set up innovation teams to regularly brainstorm how to stay ahead in these areas. For example, many clients now measure the lost productivity of having vacancies unfilled, and you'll increase your chances of winning those PSLs by constantly improving how to find candidates more quickly than your competitors. There were 2 crucially important points in that discussion for me. The first one was the ability to give clients an advantage. Think very carefully about how you can give your clients a commercial advantage. What differentiators do you have that can do exactly that? That will lead you to big business and help you crack PSLs. And think too about Nigel's comment. Companies are now measuring lost productivity more closely. If you can find candidates, good candidates, more quickly than your competitors, that's a big plus. So think very carefully about your whole candidate generation strategy and how you can become more efficient. Now, we didn't get time to cover it in much depth in that particular discussion, but it's well worth bearing in mind that you can be on preferred supplier listings at full fee, particularly for niche candidates.
Just going back to the track record, you were saying just now that if you don't have a track record with a client, it would be more difficult to sell into. I disagree with that, simply because if you have no track record and your competitors have got a track record, in our end of the market in catering and industrial recruitment, you will find that your competitors will have slipped up somewhere along the line, and you are therefore in a much better position to be able to move forward.
So there's a chink. You get it, yeah.
Very much so.
With regard to the chink and uncovering what our competitors perhaps do worse than us, or the mistakes they've made, how else can you differentiate yourselves so that you can meet one of Jeremy's criteria?
It's all to do with value-added service. What do you as a company go that extra mile? What can you do that your competitors don't? At the end of the day, it's making
what
yourself
sort of things
better.
what sort of things are we looking at? What do clients really want for that differentiation?
Management information, huge cry for that.
Very much
procurement
so.
people especially, don't you find? MI, the more the better.
MI in terms of what?
Market information, management information, data on cost to hire, time to hire, quality of hire, retention rates, attrition rates.
Performance stats generally,
Exactly. I mean, huge. We've done something recently, for example, with a major client where they had a ban on overtime, as most companies do these days. And our MI team managed to uncover the fact that actually there was loads of overtime being worked, just looking at the invoices and the timesheets. This is on the contract side of the business. And they proved to the company that £60,000 a month was being spent on unauthorised overtime, which they hadn't spotted. That saved the company, so that ban came down, and that saved the company £1 million a year.
That's a fantastic thing to be able to bring into play for potential new clients, isn't it? To be able to demonstrate the cost savings you can perhaps bring to the fore through MI.
Well, we're finding that's winning as business, literally.
I'm not surprised.
And I would encourage any recruiter to try and up the levels of MI they can produce for their clients.
What else can you do to differentiate yourself? Is there?
I mean, it may sound a little bit old-fashioned, but I think actually going and meeting the clients, I find that being in front of clients and showing your seriousness, your care, and actual genuine belief in your ability to supply and deliver is absolutely key. I work with a client where, because of the size of our organisation, they'd use much larger suppliers, and they although they recognised the importance we had, their view was, well, you're not big enough to supply the sort of business we've had. And I was very strongly vocal in disagreeing with them. They still put us on that B list, and now we've just moved up to A list because we're performing better than their A suppliers. And I've been harping on them, saying, look, we are performing better, you've got to move us up, and they have moved us up. So I think having that genuine belief and care and passion and enthusiasm is absolutely key as well.
But at the end of the day, all clients want the best candidates. So if we can prove to them that we've got a better capability at providing the best candidates, doesn't that give us the edge in terms of getting onto the list? Lucy?
Yeah, I think so. I think bidding with integrity is very important as well. I just want to sort of make that as a point, because I think very often, saying before as to what clients look for, I think they're very idealistic sometimes in what they're looking for, and they expect agencies, and a lot of agencies do actually say, yeah, we can do that, yes, 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 yes. And I think sometimes what they're looking for, and the point of differentiation, is you saying, actually, this isn't really going to be possible and this is why. And I think you have to be very honest with the client and say to them, no, you're not going to get it in this price, or no, there is a real candidate shortage in this area and therefore this price isn't reasonable, you should be paying more, and really acting in that advisory capacity. So I think that's becoming increasingly important, and I think where we have gone back to clients that we bid for and said, actually, we are prepared to agree to this, we're able to work this, but these are aspects that we can't agree to and this is why, I think they valued that an awful lot more than you saying, yes, 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 we want, where can we sign? So I think it's really important to bid with integrity and to know really what, we've talked a lot about researching the client that you want to get the PSL with, but know your own research about your own business and what your capabilities are, and really where you pitch yourself at, I think is really important.
If you were a client, which would interest you most? Sales rhetoric, or proof that a recruiter can save you time and money? Management's information can be a very powerful way to prove that you can offer a better service. For example, measure, improve, and provide proof that you offer a better service in key areas, like reducing a client's time to hire, improving the quality of their staff, or reducing their attrition rates. And you can take business from your competitors. With this kind of information at your fingertips, it can be easy to win PSLs. So when this session's ended, take some time out to consider ways in which you can measure exactly why a client should choose you for their PSL. Wasn't that comment from Sue Cuff fascinating, truly fascinating? Look at how she demonstrated almost a £1 million a year saving to a client just by focusing on management information. How easy is it for her company to win business on the back of that? It's well worth close consideration. Lucy Barnes made a very good point too, about clients valuing honest feedback. If you look too desperate for the business, then probably you are desperate. Look at the proposals carefully and think about what you want from the relationship. A few more tips for adding value, which are not common in the marketplace, are things like interview technique seminars, free training for line managers, teleconferences on legislation. You can bring these into play to add value. But more importantly, think about these issues for yourself. Let's rejoin the session. So how important are checks and things like references in particular? Jeremy?
I think if you're pitching for a contract recruitment PSL, then it's absolutely essential. In almost all circumstances, it will be part of your service level agreement as the recruiter to have done reference checks and right to work in the country. In permanent recruitment, I think referencing is absolutely one of the best business development tools, so you'd be foolish not to be doing it anyway. But also I think procurement functions in particular are becoming more sophisticated in the way they're approaching preferred supply agreements and often putting in place sort of mystery shopper situations where they will put someone in as a hypothetical candidate into your business, or going and actually auditing whether you do what you say you do.
Did you have any examples of recruiters, not specific names obviously, but examples of instances where recruiters have been caught who've not referenced candidates?
Yeah, absolutely, and thrown off the PSL.
Mm-hmm. How regular an occurrence is that?
I think it's more commonplace. Certainly if you're doing volume business with an organisation or it's a big PSL, quarterly reviews are very much part and parcel of the process. And you know, they might, well, quite often will go out and audit a business by going out to see them rather than inviting you in for that meeting.
Simon, how do you prevent a rogue recruiter, for example? Say if you had a recruiter who's very good but shortcuts on the admin and doesn't take a reference, and then you kicked off the PSL and it cost the company £2 million. A lot involved in that question, but how do you put those controls in place to prevent it happening?
The way to stop your consultants from cutting corners is to regularly audit the branches, have strict quality procedures in place within the branches themselves. And from the sales point of view, if we win a PSL or a national contract, is to ensure that the branches have 100% knowledge with regards to what is expected of them, and then to audit that on a regular basis to make sure it's happening.
Azar, do you have similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously a smaller, we are all on one side, but my whole philosophy is very much what Jeremy was saying, is that any immediate candidate that walks through the door should always be referenced anyway, because it's part of the business development technique, so that it's almost a prevention rather than cure approach, so that actually when the candidate's ready, actually he's already got 5 years with them, because we've already checked it out.
That's a crucially important point, isn't it? If it's part of your culture to win business via referencing, then you're going to be more up to date in terms of the whole process. So I think that really hits the nail on the head. It's increasingly common for PSL clients to use mystery shoppers and audits to check your service levels. Take control of this situation by having your own audits and checks in place. And not only are you less likely to lose a PSL, but you'll also have greater confidence in your service. And that extra belief can help you close deals. All aspects of your business should be considered, but because verbal references help recruiters win business anyway, a useful starting point to improve quality is to make reference checking a prevention rather than a cure. There was a great suggestion in that discussion about using verbal references as a prevention rather than a cure. When you build referencing into your culture, very nice things happen. And I'm a massive believer in using verbal references to win business into any company. But with PSLs, why not search your database and look for candidates who used to work in your target companies? Then take a reference on them, provided they left the company, of course. and use that to open doors. Also, get information from the candidate about the things that are hot in that company. Close for the meeting, and then take the business. And very soon you'll be on the PSL. Let's rejoin the discussion. So let's have a look at cracking some of the easier PSLs. As we all know around this table, I have a PSL can be overcome on the first telephone call in certain instances. Lucy, do you have any tactics or approaches in terms of turning around a situation like that, where it might be a facade and it's just an excuse to get rid of you, and at the end of the call you get some business?
I think it's very much about being or using the fact that I've got a PSL as a point of discussion. Again, as we talked before, depending on who you're talking to, pitch the questions to identify, how is it working at the moment? Does it meet your objectives? How much do you spend? What do you spend on in terms of categories, etc. So I think the sort of questioning you ask will identify what type of PSL is. Is it a national tender that's in place, or is it a preferred supplier agreement that's in place on a local basis? And I think more questioning that you ask will also determine whether or not they are saying that because it's a genuine issue or genuine reason why they can't use you or pursue a conversation, or it will identify whether it's worth pursuing at that particular point.
Why would the line of questioning identify that it's just an excuse? I mean, if you said when's it due for review, for example, they may say, well, in a year's time. How does it actually give you the tools to think, yeah, I can crack this one?
Well, I think if they are getting what they need in terms of the PSL, which very often isn't the case, for example, do you have requirements that are always being fulfilled? Very often they're not. So even if it's not up for renewal for another year or so, it may well be that there are issues or cracks within the PSL that will enable you to get in that interim period of time. I mean, we're working with companies at the moment who we aren't on the list with, who are maybe not going out for tender for another year or 2 years, but because their PSLs or contracts aren't working as they should be, they've had to go outside of their PSLs. So I think it's identifying how effectively it's working and what the opportunities are to get in on that.
I think it's important to know, again, the relative influence of the people you're talking to. So a classic example of what Lucy's saying is finding a line manager. The HR department and the purchasing department may be vehemently defensive of a PSL. The line manager, on the other hand, may feel that they're not getting the quality of the candidate they want for their particular area. And so if you can find a sponsor through a line manager saying to HR, well, actually, I'm not happy, and I happen to know of this organisation because you've already put in a CV or a service or something, then you can get an in-house person to drive the crowbar on the PSL.
So a good tactic is to use many different avenues to crack the PSL, is there?
I mean, I've always found the best way, ultimately, what clients want is candidates. If you can supply them with a candidate they can't get through their PSL, and generally that tends to be in very specific niche areas. I have recruitment companies who call me up where they have managed agencies, and I don't even know this person, but they've heard about me through various networks, and they've actually called and said, I understand you may be able to help us with this. So these are effectively HR people calling me, asking me for specific areas in niche specific areas. So I think if you've got candidates, and that's always a great way, and I mean, I've won many PSL agreements by breaking that and proving our ability, and then trying to then take more as we push forward.
So a differentiator there is a very simple one: ability to find the best candidates. So recruiters really around the country should be thinking more creatively about how to find candidates.
Key. It's absolutely key, in my opinion.
There's something else I think that you can do, which is to ask questions like, that's interesting, to what extent is your PSL helping you with risk mitigation or with legislative updates? The law is changing around us every day. To what extent is that happening? What added value are you getting? So differentiate it by saying, I can do something your PSL can't do.
And how can you help them with risk mitigation?
Well, identifying it, for example, in the contract arena, it's very, very commonplace that contractors will be in place and with a contract directly with the client company, which exposes the client company enormously to risk. And an audit to uncover those areas will throw up areas where you can take the risk away and reduce the cost. As an example, the other is data protection. HR departments and line managers are often unaware of the implications of that act in the recruitment process. So our ability to say, we can update you, run briefings, educate and train your people in how to be compliant is terribly important. Lots of companies in our sector, certainly in our sector, can't do that.
Very interesting. I think constantly thinking about ways in which to differentiate, absolutely. Earlier in the programme, we looked at the value of management information and internal audits and controls. And when combined with effective questioning, this becomes the key to cracking PSLs. By effective questioning, I mean asking questions to uncover typical client problems and then proving that you have the solution to those problems. For example, if you can prove that you have a better time to hire than your competitors, then try asking a question like, how do you measure the cost of delays in the hiring process? This type of effective questioning will help you win lots of PSLs. If you find yourself asking the classic knee-jerk question when the client says they've got a PSL, which tends to be, when's it due for review, then think about Sue Cuff's response. Think about what she suggested. She challenged the client. To what extent does your company's PSL handle risk mitigation? Really get the client to think, challenge them. The implication there is they're not doing it correctly, and you can provide that benefit for them. And don't forget, as they're reminding us all, that the candidate is key. Now, if you want some more tips to overcome preferred supply listings on a fairly consistent basis, I suggest the following two. They're good fun and they do work. On the temporary side, you may say to the client, if it's a line manager, you may say, if it's Friday at 5 o'clock and your current suppliers can't supply and you need someone for Monday urgently, who else would you then use? Sometimes, in an easier to crack PSL, that will turn the situation around. Another one, which works very well on the permanent side, is to say, I don't actually want to be on your preferred supply listing. I specialise in providing high demand, hard to find candidates. What's the most difficult vacancy you're working on right now that your current suppliers can't fill? They're not going to work every time, but with line managers, they can be very potent. Let's rejoin the discussion to look at how to influence decision makers. We talked about having a sponsor, Nigel, internally, perhaps a line manager who will say good things on our behalf and getting our foot in the door, so to speak. How else can we influence decision makers? Does the panel have any other tactics in terms of influencing decision makers? How would someone influence you, Jeremy?
Lunch.
I think a point that was made earlier is really by not being overly familiar. I think that's one thing that recruiters are dreadful at in many instances, where they try and make too many assumptions about what it is that you want and what it is that you need. So really making every effort to understand the organisation with whom you are talking and if at all possible, the individual. And research, again, is key in that. If you really know what you're talking about, and that happens relatively infrequently, it leaves a good impression on the individual to whom you are talking.
What about things like, for example, if a recruiter invited you to a business breakfast, which they were hosting and running professionally, and it was a key interest area for you, would you go to that business breakfast potentially?
Yeah, I think if it was relevant to my world from a business perspective, then yes. I mean, I think it's one great way of networking for those people within the organisations to whom you're trying to become or you want to become clients. And secondly, if it is genuinely informative and teaches them something that they don't know, then it's going to do nothing but leave a good impression.
A suggestion I had at one of my innovation seminars recently. I ran a seminar for recruitment directors on innovation to win business in tough markets. And the suggestion was that collaborate with a non-competing recruitment business. And they may be on the PSL. And then with that company, arrange a business breakfast where they invite their clients, including people who are on their PSLs, and you invite your clients. And then present yourselves at that particular session as an influencer. What's your view on that? Would that have worked for you when you were at Barclays, Nigel? Would you have any similar experiences of that?
Examples like that. I mean, the 2 points that Jeremy made and you've picked up on are the relevance. That if it's not relevant, they won't go. They're too busy. So what's in it for them to go rather than just what's in it for you? So sending out a mailer to 100 people to invite them to something without targeting why it's relevant to them is a waste of time. The other thing is, the first question I would probably ask is who else is going? Who else will be there? So you can be quite cute in how you need to get somebody, a warm person who will commit themselves, and then use them as a hook, whether it's another partner organisation or whether it's an individual. I went to one the other day, I'm quite open about it, where it was hosted by Microsoft at the campus in Berkshire, and they got the group HR director of Microsoft to make a presentation about where Microsoft was in recruitment. Would you go? Of course you'd go. This is a major prospect. You're going to be in the same room as him. At the very least, you were going to say hello and get his business card. So it was a hook, and it was packed. Would
the panel recommend that sort of tactic, though, for recruitment companies to chip away at the major accounts?
We do run business seminar breakfasts, and in fact, I've actually gone on to 2 PSLs as a result of that. And I think half of it is that your clients, when they come in to meet you, they meet other recruiters and they actually realise that these people are decent and normal. They get to see your office and realise that you're not in some little office, and you've actually got professionalism, and it gives people confidence in your ability. And of course they will then talk. I mean, we ran one recently. We had a chap come in to talk about psychometrics, which was a very topical in the city, and the value and assessment. And he had a couple of examples, and he gave people real examples, and they did some tests, and it was all good fun and a laugh. And again, we targeted certain HR people for that particular area, and it was very successful.
I was just going to support that, but I think I do entirely. But you asked the question about what influences the client, and I would add to that, making them look good. If you can emerge from something, whether it's a briefing or an encounter, with some information that makes you look good inside your company, because you can then take that back to the branch and educate or inform the CEO, the board, the line, then that makes it, and if we've done that for you, then we should be in a position to influence you. You should be thinking, I want more of these people, they've got good things to give me.
Yes. Does that involve perhaps producing reports or forwarding interesting reports to the...
Market information?
Market information, legislation updates.
Surveys.
Absolutely. We would do a lot of work with public sector and care within that. There's so many legislative changes taking place that if you can find a way to update and inform your clients, they will really want to hear that. And I think it goes back to what Nigel was saying, make it relevant to them. I think very often recruiters are very aware of what they want to get across and less about what the client needs from you. And I think you really have to operate, and your starting point needs to be from the client's agenda.
How often does that happen, Jeremy? What percentage of recruiters would inform clients in that fashion? Business breakfast or reports or business updates?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more relevant and probably more prevalent as well as in a tough market that we might be in at the moment. People are thinking of ways that are a little bit cleverer and cuter to develop relationships with their clients. Another good example, and I hate to come back to it again, but referencing. When you're going in to do an effective reference, find out what were the things that this candidate did that really helped out your business. You're then finding out about topics that are hot within that organisation, that again then leaves you with the opportunity to, you've spoken to the client, SAP or an ERP implementation is a real hot thing. You can then be forwarding interesting information to that organisation about the topic that is hot. So it's another great business development.
Very, very interesting point indeed. Recruitment has changed in recent years, and we have to use different tactics to crack preferred supplier listings. If you want to influence the key decision makers, you need to inform them, invite them to seminars, send reports to them. Position yourself as an expert within their specific field. And use references to find out what's hot within that company. And once you've uncovered that information, produce a report and send a report to that specific individual. Or you may wish to just simply ask clients, what are their key challenges? Whichever way you do it, inform if you want to influence. Let's rejoin the discussion as we look at the tender process. So let's move on to the tender and the whole process involved in that. Things have changed in recent years, and now we're having e-auctions and internet tendering. Azar, you've had some recent experiences of that. Could you share them with us, please?
Yeah, it's interesting, and to use the word cute from clients anyway, because it's like giving all your competitors a knife and everyone slashing each other's throats and waiting for seeing who's going to spill the most blood. It's a very clever way of doing it. Clients obviously have a major advantage in it. I think the key is to know where to stop. and realising that actually the cost opportunity of selling yourself as opposed to not getting that business, there is a break point, and it's a question of starting high and going to that break point, and at that point, that's it. Unfortunately, the temptation often is to keep going when everybody else is going, but you've got to stop.
So you can see the bid in real time as to what your competitors are actually.
Yep, you can see where you are as well. The bids that I've got involved with, you can actually see where you are in relation to your 4 competitors. You don't know who they are, but you just know if you're first, second, third or fourth, and what quartile you're in, and you make a decision as to whether you want to move or not.
Simon, your experiences of that?
Yeah, very, very similar. We've recently bid on a national contract on the same basis. In our case, there are about 16 other agencies bidding for the same business. I think, well, our tactics were basically to look at the service level agreement that we were given prior to the auction, look at the categories of staff that we were going to be supplying, and look at A, where we would like to be with regards to margin, B, worst case scenario, make up your mind exactly how much margin you need to achieve, and then go for it. But it is quite disheartening.
What are the dangers of actually making a mistake and going in too low to your business, Sue?
It's a very real risk.
Very
as
real
you say,
risk.
you get carried away, as you said, and the sheer fear of losing it altogether drives you on to ridiculous margins you can never possibly support.
Absolutely, it's almost like gambling.
Exactly, yeah.
And cleverly enough, I think what I find is clients give you that's the last bit. So you've gone through all the hoops and you've done all the work, and you certainly don't want to lose it on price, Yeah.
And in terms of the further ramifications, not only are you locked in on low margins perhaps, but also the type of people you have to recruit to service those accounts can be quite different, can't they? In that they're not necessarily new business winners, they're good servicers. Tied in on low margins, what sort of issues can that cause, Nigel? I mean, if
it does get quite complex. I think that the danger of buying something without having thought it through and then being saddled with it are they're enormous. I think you have to look at your core business. Is it core business? Is it stuff that you've got lots of and therefore it's easy for you to do, or not? And that will determine how much additional resource you're going to need to service it. So the cost of delivery is important, and in your core business it might be, well, we have the resources, we have the technology, we can add this on and we can protect a certain margin. If it's slightly off your core business, you're going to need to hire people, you may have to do something different, and therefore you're going to need a better margin. And it's a question of how far from the core you go that will determine how far up the curve you can go in terms of your margin. And as Uzair said, you have to know when to stop.
So in terms of putting the mark in the sand, what sort of tips would you have? How do you judge that? Did you need a finance director to be looking at the proposal?
It all depends on A, the volume of business we're talking about, the types of staff. Again, is it your core business? If it's your core business, and B, there's lots of it, then you can establish how low your margins are going to go. But the one thing you've got to be careful of is a consultant in a branch will very often take a national contract and think, oh, I'm going to make, I don't know, 18% margin on that, or they've got local business that they're going to make a 30% margin on. Which are they going to fill? And you have to make it very clear to your staff that although you're not going to make quite so much money on that booking with the national contract as a whole is more valuable to the company because it's got a much higher turnover. But it is a trap that you can get caught in.
So there are plenty of issues to consider, again, with the type of people who are going to be working on those accounts.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I think you haven't really mentioned a lot about the people that we have doing the work. You then get into a real analysis of how you incentivise people. You'll find that the shifts in the marketplace, what a good agency will do will preempt this and go back to their people and look at their remuneration packages. Because what you'll end up doing is you'll end up winning a piece of business for what the managing director, if you like, or the FD thinks is right for the company. And actually you map the deal that you've just secured with what it means for your staff, and there's a conflict. And then you're in real trouble.
Very important point.
Real trouble.
That's a case in point of where some recruitment consultancies do go wrong, because you might have a corporate services team going out on winning tenders who haven't talked to and worked with the actual branches delivering that service, and the two are at conflict with each other. So I think it's really important to buy the teams who are actually servicing the business into the contract right at the outset at tender stage.
Absolutely. I think there are lots of dangers also, because if you lose the account for whatever reason, you've got 4 or 5 people working on it maybe, if it's a large account, then that can also cause problems, can't it? So you had a point to make.
Yeah, you mentioned an FD being involved, and I think it's really important before any of this even starts, an FD or commercial director of some sort gets involved and looks and scopes the deal, right down to what we can afford to pay in terms of commission. And we set out knowing that that deal is doable. One I was going to make earlier on a point about rewarding our people. It hasn't got to be against margin all the time. It can be against customer service criteria. So the sort of farmers we're talking about, the major account people, I think benefit from being rewarded, against the SLA, customer satisfaction feedback, rather than all the time margin.
Setting up key performance indicators.
Yes, exactly. And I find that works very well.
Definitely, I'd agree with that. I think consultancies need to become more aware, and I think our industry has become a lot more sophisticated, that the ones who go out and get the business aren't always the best at actually servicing it. And I think it's sometimes splitting what the contract requires. If it's a very high maintenance servicing contract, it may be that you recruit specifically customer service coordinators to service that, rather than, as you highlighted, sort of consultants sometimes who are more revenue driven, and be more interested in maybe other clients where they can make more money. It's less about that when you're delivering the service. Absolutely, it's more about how they deliver it.
What are the common mistakes or issues are faced during the tendering process?
Going in too cheap is probably the biggest mistake.
But even before you got to the point of putting a number on it, it's about understanding exactly what the client wants, but it also is about understanding what the client wants and what the client thinks they want or needs. Because I still think that depending on which department in the client organisation is driving this, and I'm sure Jeremy will agree with this, the level of understanding of what they want varies enormously, and also there may be an inherent conflict, as we discussed before, between the purchasing department and the users. And the more able you are to understand all of that, the better able you are to get your tender right.
In this session, we've looked at the value of management information and how effective internal controls will give you a competitive edge. But remember, some decision makers may not know what you do, so think very creatively about how you can influence those key people to want to work with you. And don't forget the potential impact upon your business of winning lots of PSLs. It's important to be aware of the different kinds of staff your business will need. And finally, know where to stop if the PSL process turns into a bidding war. Now, once you become good at winning preferred supplier listings, there's actually a very real risk to your business of getting it wrong. Think about the staff issues that might be caused. Think about the need to change your remuneration policy and reward staff in different ways. Remember Sue's comment about rewarding staff against the service level agreement rather than against margin. It's a good tip. So we've come to the end of the session. We've looked at the tender, how to influence decision makers, the controls you need in place to prevent yourself from making mistakes, and also what clients really want from the preferred supply list suppliers. I look forward to joining you in the next session, when we'll be looking at the presentation and also key account management.